What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Jimmy and Doug of Ice Age. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
anytime, man. Anytime. It's so awesome to have you here. Waves of Loss and Power, the first new Ice Age album in quite a long time, 2 decades. So just going back into it, after 2 decades, how did the making of this album come to be? Did it almost feel like you were just picking up where you left off 20 years ago? Or, a lot happens in 20 years. It's fair to say that this is a new beginning for Ice Age and a brand new era.
Yeah, do you want to take this, Doug, or do you want me to? You
Sure.
can start.
Yeah. So basically, in a way, it feels like we never, there was never a time that we were not in contact as friends. And that's one of the things that makes this band so special is that, nobody quit, nobody was fired, no one said we're breaking up. It was just kind of what things went as far as they could with what we were trying to do um, back in like the around 2004 2005, and then we just hit a wall with what we were trying to accomplish, but we stayed in contact, and there's always been that brotherhood in this band. And so it was, we happened to be at Hal's house again as friends, and Hal had been pushing this idea of let's just jam, let's just, be in a room, and purely for the love of playing music together, let's just do that with no other agenda, no other expectations. And from that moment, and this is going back, I think around 2015, then we just continued on that vein of, the thing is, when Jimmy picks up a guitar, it's an amazing thing to behold for me, because he picks up a guitar and he immediately just starts playing something brand new. You're never going to hear Jim pick up an instrument and start playing something old. It's like immediately there's something new that's coming out of him, and it's always this great riff idea or this great part, and then it's like, wait a minute, what was that? And then immediately the rest of us all react, and before you know it, we're playing, and we're creating. And so that, it's, so yeah, I guess you could say we took a break, but it's been a long time in the making of where we are today over the past few years.
Yeah. For me, it was actually literally a break. I think when in 2005, I literally put my guitars down and did not play guitar for like 10 years. I've been playing guitar since I was, teenager. So I did this for a long time, and I did it at the progressive rock level, which means not a lot of fun and a lot of practice. And a lot of practice and a lot of long hours, and a lot of arduous stuff. And at that point, it felt like a good time for me to actually just take a break and get away from the instrument a little bit, and that's what I did. And I literally did not pick up a guitar for like 10 years until Hal's Barbecue. And then, like Doug said, the first thing when we sat down together, I hadn't practiced the guitar. I hadn't changed strings. I haven't done anything. And then all of a sudden we started playing some stuff, and then ideas came together, and then we just said that, whenever you put the four of us in a room, no matter what the circumstances are, something really good comes out of it. So I think that was the beginning of this project, this part of Ice Age.
Did you feel like you had to relearn the guitar in a way, or did it almost feel like it was like riding a bike?
It felt different. The muscle memory is there, but obviously I had no calluses. I haven't been literally like practicing every day, because in the old days, we had band practice like 4 nights a week, like 3 or 4 hours a night. And then on the weekends, I would play guitar myself and just go walk through my exercise. And I never did any of that, right? So, it felt good writing songs, but it felt like weird having to now say, oh, my fingers are not really caught up 100%. I have to start practicing again. So that was very, that was new. Again, it's like
Well, with the making of this brand new album and coming back into it, was there at all a preconceived vision? Was there at all sort of like looking into the past of your previous two albums, or being that again, we're new people in 20 years in a way, like this was maybe like a very experimental and improvisational process? Because really, I mean, Ice Age continuing like in that vein of Prague, there's plenty of room to sort of like experiment and step into uncharted territory.
I think it was some of both. I think on one hand, we didn't have the pressure or the expectation of, oh, it has to be this or that, uh, because we were doing it only for ourselves. It was only about, it wasn't like, oh, we're starting to write a new album and it has to be fit into a certain mold. It was, we're just playing for the sake of playing, for the joy of it. So there was that opportunity to experiment, but also there was, once we started formulating a couple of what have become these, prog epics that are on the new album. You've got Perpetual Child 2, and you've got To Say Goodbye, that suite. There's going to be a thematic nod to what came before, and this is part of that prog tradition, because Perpetual Child, as a concept and as a song, began on the first album, and To Say Goodbye actually has parts that are on the debut, The Great Divide, that are also on the second album, Liberation. So there are thematic and there are lyrical conceptual nods to those earlier works that we continue here, but it's not, it's not so direct. There's things that nod to it, and that Jimmy could talk about more compositionally. Um, but then there's also stuff on there, like there's a new song called Together Now, um, which we just did an official audio release of. And to me, like, I mean, it sounds like Ice Age, but it also doesn't sound anything like what's on the first two records.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was it was not intentional. I think it just happened over time. Perpetual Child was the first song we started working on once we got into an actual studio. Because after a couple of after that meeting with Hal, and we started chatting with each other and saying, no, maybe we should do this. Let's get into a studio and start playing. The first thing that we worked on was that. It was something that came spontaneously on the spot. And then we started working on that song, and it felt like old, like Ice Age right away. It felt like that's where it was, and kind of like stopped and then take a break, and we just never like lost anything. It felt like that, and I think that's where Josh got the inspiration about potentially connecting the two lyrically to that effect. As far as musically, other than the fact that we always write a song to us is a journey, right? For us and for the listener, and it's not really something that has very set structure. And you'll notice that throughout the songs, like we vary the way we structure songs because it feels like a journey. It has to feel like a journey. It has to lead to the right part, and it has to take the user through all these ups and downs, right? So that we always used, and that's you'll see that everywhere. So Perpetual Child feels like Perpetual Child 1 because it has the same ups and downs and all the stuff that we do as Ice Age. But I think the lyrics are more so than the music is something that connects it.
Well, and I know it's cliche to always ask what does the album name mean in a way, but with Prague, with bands that dabble in the realm of Prague, I have no choice because Prague really is explores a concept. That's what I've always think is amazing about Prague is that it's able to dive into a lot of meanings in a way and really tell stories in a very very complex matter. Like they always say that I'm totally quoting the wrong artist for it, but John Mayer says songs are like stories and stories are like songs. I think Prague is really the perfect example of that in a way. In terms of the album name, Waves of Loss and Power, one thing I've noticed is loss is something obviously that you lose, it means loss, but power is something that you gain in a way. or lose at the same time. So is this at all rooted in like a personal experience in a way, or is Waves and Lost in Power sort of like telling a story or meaning completely external from who you both personally are?
Well, this is where I wish that Josh wasn't on a plane at the moment and he could answer it because Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, but Josh came up with the album title, and it was one of those things that we were bouncing different ideas around, and when he presented it, it immediately resonated with all of us of like, wow, that's great, it's evocative, and I think it leaves a lot of room for the music fan to come to their own conclusions, just like you did, of what does this mean, and see the cover artist that came up with the concept of the knight on the hobby horse. That was his interpretation based on not just the album title, but also he listened to the music and he read the lyrics. Loss as a concept is definitely something that Josh explored lyrically in To Say Goodbye, and that is something that does carry over into the new To Say Goodbye suite that's on the new album. So that's definitely one of those universal concepts that that gets explored lyrically. But Jim, did you have anything you wanted to add
No, I
about
mean
the title?
that's exactly right, and I think Josh will probably explain it more than you do. But to me, like Waves of Loss and Power means that throughout your life you go through all these ups and downs, the waves that come, and sometimes you're having lows, and sometimes you're having highs, and then at some point you have to go through all of them, and at the end of the day you come up as a person you are now because of all the waves that you went through throughout your life. I think that kind of like that's what it means to me. I'm sure Josh has a much more refined explanation because I don't know what was in his head when it came up, but that's what it meant to me when I heard it.
Yeah. I've done Zoom interviews in cars and like some of the most obscure places, some on the beach, some in cars. I haven't done an interview on a plane yet. We got to bring the interview Mile High Club one day.
that,
Yeah,
that would have been great.
Yeah.
that'd
Yeah.
be amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
some planes have Wi-Fi these days, so
yeah. But but I've also said some pretty bad jokes that I think on an airplane would get you probably one-way ticket to Guantanamo Bay. So maybe
yeah.
like airport security being
Yeah.
like, "What? I don't think you want to say blast beats too loud on an airplane." I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But w-
Yeah.
did that at all maybe reflect in the idea that again, being away for 20 years, picking back up the instrumentation and reuniting as a band, did that maybe sort of factor into what the meaning of the music could have also have meant as well?
I don't see it that way so much. Again, there's a lot. This band has always been very spontaneous and experimental with the writing, and obviously because it's Prague, there's a lot of headiness to the way the lyrics are, are composed. Um, but I think that the album title came close to the end of the process of when we had decided, like, okay, we've actually got enough material here that this could be an album. So I think that it was one of those, I don't want to say it was an afterthought, but I think that it was something that was arrived at after a lot of the lyrics were already done. And again, Josh could correct on that. But my recollection is it was towards the end of the process.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that the music for not just this album but for Ice Age in general is fairly experimental. I mean, that's what prog really is. It's music that isn't confined to a structure or a specific sound. So does that maybe make it a little bit easier and allow for more flexibility to try new things and bring in new elements instrumentally to the band?
Yeah, it does. I think that's what we like about playing prog, in a sense, is that we can experiment and we can just think about, like I said, think about a journey that you take from the beginning when you start a song all the way to the end, without have any preconceptions about how it's supposed to be structured. You have to have a verse, chorus, bridge, and all that normal stuff that you have, right? Because at some point, like thematically, when you're writing something, it takes you in a certain way and takes you down a certain avenue, and you create something like totally new. Obviously, in all that, we're not like experimenting for the sense of experimenting. We just don't do that. We don't sit down and say we have to write something odd and weird because it has to be odd and weird because it's prog. It could be like the simplest riff or the simplest drum beat you've ever heard, and it can go into the most complex drum beat because that's what it led us, and that's what the mood led us. Because we mostly write live, we just get together and play, and sometimes certain musical elements and passages lead you down a path, and it feels natural. And as far as all the, and that's why I think eventually, like Ice Age, if you hear Ice Age, there's like, it feels natural to hear all those changes and to hear all those musical passages go by and connect to one another. That's why it feels more natural, and that's what we try to do.
Mhm.
We just don't try to say, something. Right now, we just have to be complex and complicated because it's prog and it has to be complex and complicated. It just has to fit the song, it has to fit the mood, it has to fit the journey, it has to make sense not only to us but to people. If we want fans and people to connect to what we're trying to do, it has to make sense to them as well.
Do, I
One of
like.
the things I really love about this band, and I'm a guy that came into the band as a fan of progressive music, is that there's so much feel and instinct behind the way Jimmy and Josh write music. Like just like Jim said, it's not contrived. It naturally pours out of them this way. But there's like with Hal, as the root of the rhythm section, it's always got a groove that's there, so that even if it's in an odd time signature, it's still grooving. And that's just I mean that's one of the things that makes Ice Age so special from
Yeah,
my
that's unique.
perspective.
Yeah. I think the rhythm section in this band is tremendous, and uh, between Hal and Doug, I don't think you can find like a better rhythm section around the music. It's just because I think both listen to the music and play to the music rather than playing to time signatures, rather than sitting down and dissecting a part, and signatures saying, okay, this is a 3/4 and 6/5, and I have to play this and I have to play that. Everybody just kind of like plays to the music what they feel is the right, what they feel. Like once I play a riff, Doug would hear it, go, this is what it feels right to play under that, and Josh and Hal would do the same thing. So at the end of the day, things sound sometimes simple, and yet they're deceptively complicated, and the vice versa exists. Some things are, sound very complicated and they're deceptively simple, to figure out.
Yeah. Well, you led me perfectly into the final question of this interview. And I love having the genre definition debate. I ask about it with hardcore, I ask about it with metalcore, I ask about it with the genre. But how would you define prog metal? Because Fate's Warning sounds very different from Opeth. Queensryche sounds very different from Rush. I mean, Between the Buried and Me
Right.
sounds very different from Caligula's Horse. So, like, how would you define prog in a way? Not even just prog metal, but prog in general.
I mean, for me, what makes it stand apart is that I think that there's a level of intellectual approach to what's happening musically. So I think it's intellectual. I think it's experimental. I think, like Jim said, the song structure uh, approach is not reliant on that more pop sensibility of, okay, there has to be an intro, then a verse, then a chorus. Like what I say would fall into the definition of pop music. So, and because it's prog, there's going to be a certain level of musicianship, and there's going to be, also, as Jim said, there's going to be that journey that you get taken on, where it's almost it's an adventure. Like where does this start and where does it end up, and what happens, in that journey. So, like I grew up on Rush as one of my favorite bands, but I also love Fate's Warning and I love Opeth. And I think that there's a lot of different colors to what prog can be. And also, I think it doesn't get said enough, but it should be said that another thing about Ice Age that is different than, let's say, Fate's Warning. Fate's Warning is very guitar centric in the way they write because, earlier on, there were always two guitar players and there was a lot of guitar harmony happening. And then then they went through a phase where it was really just more one guitar, and then they would sometimes have someone playing either keyboards and guitar, or they had like Kevin Moore that guested on A Pleasant Shade of Grey. But in Ice Age, there's this interplay between Josh and Jimmy, between the guitar and keyboards, and you've got like guitar heavy stuff, but then the keyboards always also have their very important role. And then you've got the new To Say Goodbye suite on the new album that's very keyboard centric. And then also River Flow, which is this incredible song on the new album that's very keyboard centric, but then it doesn't matter whether the song originates on keys or originates on guitar. Josh and Jim always find a way where it's not, there's this interplay and there's this marriage between those things that it never sounds like, well, we're going to force the guitar here, we're going to force the keyboards here. It just happens. They do unison stuff or harmony stuff, or a keyboard part will happen and Jim will come up with this perfect guitar thing to complement it, or the guitar thing that is pushing something like Perpetual Child 2, and then Josh finds the perfect keyboard thing to complement it. So it's just that's my response.
To me, like prog, let me put it that way. This is how prog means to me. I mean, I grew up in classic hard rock and heavy rock of the 70s and 80s, right? To me, bands like Deep Purple and Thin Lizzy and Led Zeppelin and the early Rush and all those other rock bands that wrote music, those were at the frontier of writing. You can go back and listen to this A Child in Time from Deep Purple, and it doesn't have the standard song structure that you get. That started to happen to rock music was at the frontier at that point. And at a certain point, the record business took over, and all of a sudden structure started showing up. And then all the songs started to be structured the same way, right? And then prog to me was a natural continuation of that hard rock, which means, yes, write good songs, but experiment also, right? Go to different directions. Try something new, which happened. Like you listen to Led Zeppelin albums, they took stuff from the past and they made different ways of presenting songs. Something like Kashmir is not your standard verse chorus song. All that stuff at some point in the music business, went away. And everything in the 80s and 90s started being the same thing, just different musicians playing the same thing. So what's to me the natural continuation was prog. Prog was the one thing that let musicians be musicians and write and move on. That's the way I see it.
You guys both answered this so perfectly. I'm very impressed by these answers. That was very well done. Excellent work. Round of applause for that.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
So before we go, I want to thank you both so much for your time and for such an awesome conversation. And of course, thank you guys for coming back and giving us new music to revisit the old times 20 years ago with Ice Age and to make us look forward to the new times. Just is there anything else with Ice Age that you would like to promote in terms of can we be expecting some live shows to celebrate this awesome masterpiece, and anything else you'd like to promote or shout outs you'd like to give?
Yeah, that is the plan. Right now, we're going to be opening the Prague Power Festival in Atlanta in September. And that's going to be like our first big kind of comeback appearance. We're expecting to do like some more local warm up to prepare for that. And, just really want to thank everyone for staying in touch with us. Hal kept the Facebook page going during the years where there wasn't that much happening and where people would reach out and always saying, oh, were you guys doing anything? I wish you would come back and do something. So, now all the big social media platforms we have presence on, and there's been great response and outreach. And I would just say, look for us everywhere where you have your social media activity. You know, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we've had the Facebook, and we have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Ice Age is a band. And there's going to be more content that's already there and more to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Ice Age Waves of Loss and Power, the first new Ice Age album in 20 years. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Yeah.